Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to yet another installment of the NTC podcast. This is Aaron Washington, your host. Avi Tyagi joins me on my right. We are glad to be back with you guys for episode 93, brought to you by Sports Business Classroom. So this time around, we will be diving into the batch of second round or second year players after we had two consecutive podcasts discussing the rookies for this year's NBA class. So we want to move on and cover some second-year players. That's a popular debate. Of course, there's guys, further on down the pipeline, but rookies and sophomores get a lot of coverage in the NBA. There even used to be a rookie-sophomore game, Avi. I'm sure you remember that back in the day. That was a lot of fun. I kind of want them to bring that back, honestly,
Same.
if we're just kind of throwing out ideas, man. But Avi, hope you've been well. Glad to have you on for the pod. I hope you're staying warm. I'm doing what I can. I'm kind of dreaming of the past few months. I was on a cruise back in October, so I brought out my Royal Caribbean hoodie or kind of pullover to kind of just like reminisce about the good times. but yeah, man, glad to have you back on.
Once again, glad to be here. Glad to talk sophomores. As you can tell, I got my a winter beard and stash going over here. So yeah, we're buckling in for the winter, and hopefully we'll be ready for spring, just like these NBA teams will be.
Yeah, man, it's hard to believe that it's we're about 40 to 42 games through the season already. Just time is flying. The season is flying like always. It seems like we blink and it'll be spring and it'll be time for playoff basketball. So that's just wild to think about.
It really is. I mean, time flew fast.
It just gets worse every year, man. Like it just never stops, honestly. But for this episode, guys, like I said, Sophomores is the name of the game. Sophomore Summit, if you will, 2024. So this will be the players that were drafted in 2022, excluding Chet Holmgren. As we discussed in a prior podcast, he is technically the class of 22, but he sat out his rookie campaign, so he did not make his debut until this season, 2023-24. So he is in another discussion. If you guys want to see Chet breakdown, be sure to check out our other episode. If you're watching on YouTube, I will link it somewhere in your top right corner of the screen, and you can check out that episode. But for this time around, Avi, let's get into the second-year players because there are quite a bit of them that have been making noise, made some notable improvements, and have been really making noise for the respective teams. And I think it's fitting to get started with the first overall pick in the 2022 draft. That is going to be Paolo Banchero for the Orlando Magic. And this was an interesting draft, Avi, because there were three players that were kind of rumored to go number one overall between Chet, Paolo, and Jabari Smith Jr., who we will talk about in a few minutes. But all of these guys are in the mix. Paolo was selected. Some people saw it coming, some didn't. Myself, I was kind of on the fence about who they were going to select for this for that number one pick. But so far, the returns have been very positive when it comes to Paolo's performance. So, as I noted before, number one overall pick. He's made strides for the Magic. His scoring is up this season, about 22.8 points a game, up from 20 last season. The 2-point percentage is really similar, a slight increase there. But the big difference is the 3-point percentage for him so far. So he's up about 6% on 3-pointers as opposed to last season so far. And he's keeping his volume down. It's only about 4 per game. He's not launching threes at a high clip. But to use a phrase, Avi, that you've used in the past, he knows how his bread is buttered. He knows where to get his shots at. He knows where he likes to make his money. He's getting into the mid-range. He's getting into the paint. So he's a guy that has a large frame. Like we're talking about a 4 that has the size of like a smaller 5, honestly.
Yeah.
You're thinking about a guy that's like 6'9", 6'10", 250. Serious muscle, serious mass. He can get downhill. He can draw fouls. 7 free throws a game for a guy that's in his second year is nothing to sneeze at. He's already, above average in that regard, able to draw fouls. He needs to work on the efficiency a little bit. When you talk about his free throw shooting, it's down from 74% last season to 69%. You want to see a guy like that at least in the mid-70s, I would say. You want to see him convert those easy opportunities. If he's going to be such a magnet for fouls, he needs to convert more of those free throws. He's also pretty inefficient as a 2-point shooter right now. He is getting better, though. He's at about 40% as opposed to last season that was about 36%. So he's making strides, he's making moves in that regard. And for him, I also think he's becoming a little bit better of a passer, recognizing that he is the caliber of player already that's going to command double teams. So there are going to be opportunities to find a Jonathan Isaac, to find a Jalen Suggs, to find a Franz Wagner when they're open. And, nothing crazy, but his assist percentage is up from 17% last season to about 23% this season. Assists per game are up 3.7 rookie year, 4.9, almost 5 this season. So for a forward, 5 to 6 assists per game is a very healthy mark to be at. So around the margins, he needs to clean up his game a little bit. But overall, I mean, it's hard not to be impressed by the play of a guy that the Magic picked to be a franchise player. He's kind of delivered in that regard. So he's a guy that you can plug in at the 4, plug in at the 5. He's even played some 3 a little bit this season because they're such a big team. Like he can play all these different positions. They're pretty versatile, the Magic. So I like how he's fit in. I like how the Magic utilize him. And I like how he's understanding where he's going to make his money, really be the most effective player. So once the efficiency rises, he gets more experience, he sees more coverages, he knows where to get his shots even better than he is now. Man, destructive force. Love his game, man.
Love his game too. And at the same time, I feel like as much as the Magic have let him kind of develop his game and almost roam in a way where he has more opportunities than most power forwards or small forwards would be, consider depending what you consider his position, he has more freedom to create shots than most. But I feel like in a way that's actually overtaxed him. It makes sense because this Magic team, if you look at it, it really doesn't have much shot creation. On many nights, it really does feel like, hey, Paulo and Franz, you figure something out. Mo just hit some threes. Goga block some shots. Jalen Suggs be what you are, which is a chaos agent, and we'll figure something out.
Oh yeah.
But sustainably, in terms of his long-term development, I think the one thing right now, other than the shot, which we've already discussed, it's a decent shot, but it still feels like there's a little bit of a catapult action when he's going into his pull-up, which kind of slows down the release and neutralizes its effectiveness. But I think the biggest thing for him is the burst as a driver. Right now, he is very inefficient as a driver. According to NBA.com, on a large volume of drives, he is shooting 40.8%, which is kind of similar to how we were discussing Scoot. And when I watch the two, I almost feel like I'm watching a bigger version of Scoot in some ways. I'll explain. Both of them horizontally can cover a lot of ground. But then when you're asking them to finish, the layup package is a little bit questionable, and they're having trouble right now turning that horizontal momentum into vertical explosiveness. And so what we see is Paulo, he's huge. He can burst by people a little bit, but mostly he has that huge frame. He can push his way around, generate strong driving angles, and get right to the rim. But then when he encounters a shot blocker and he's trying to go up, he just gets almost no lift, and he tries doing some floaters, layups that don't really have a chance. And that's what's kind of keeping his efficiency down right now. That's kind of where he's lacking. I don't know how solvable that is. So my hope would be that on this team, as they add more shot creation over time, as they try to take their next step, maybe he slots in better as a 2, where he can just attack closeouts or attack even more open lanes where maybe the shot blocker has been pulled out because there's more spacing around him. Just something to make it easier so that his efficiency can rise and his overall effectiveness as a impactful player for winning increases.
I want to go back to the point you made about the Magic's roster in general.
Yeah.
When you think about who he's playing next to, I mean, you made a great point. He's playing next to a Jalen Suggs, Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter Jr., Markelle Fultz. None of these players command respect beyond the three-point line on a consistent basis. So for Paolo, what's that going to do? That's going to constrain driving lanes. That's going to have to – it forces him into tougher shots. It's almost like it's similar to what we talked about with Wemby a little bit in terms of the type of shots he takes. He has more talented teammates, Paolo does, but his teammates are not going to stretch the floor. They're not going to create floor balance. A lot of them are similar to Paolo in that they make their money inside the arc. So they're going to get to the rim. They're going to pull up for a lot of 2-pointers. They like to draw fouls. So there is a little bit of an overlap there in that team in terms of offensive production. And you look at the Magic's offensive rating in general. I mean, they in the past several years they never ranked as an even average offensive team. They've always been below average, bottom third. And this year's the same thing. They're not a strong offensive team. So you need more shot creation. You need more spacing. That's going to be the next step of the evolution of the Orlando Magic. And then subsequently, like you said, it's going to improve his workload, his the types of shots he generates. I mean, that mark you gave on what he's shooting near the rim is it's awful, honestly, for a guy like that. The type of frame he has. Cleaning the glass paints a similar picture. I mean, in the short mid range, he's at 38%, 29th percentile. At the rim, they have him at 61, which is the 24th percentile among guys in his type of position as a forward. So, yeah, I mean, definitely needs to improve. I think there's a little bit of room for improvement on his front, just individually as a player. I mean, he's a second-year guy. He's not going to have it all figured out. However, if the team's construction was a little bit more fluid, it worked more seamlessly around him, it would probably make him even more efficient. So it works on both sides. They need to be better about the type of players they put around him, like a Buddy Hield type of player. I think they were rumored to be looking to trade for a guy like him, or if not, Buddy Hield himself. So the guys like that for this team, I think, would help a ton. Like a more of a floor spacing 5, like a Miles Turner type would help a ton. Instead of having Goga Batadze in the middle, just clogging things up. It's redundant. I think that's kind of like the main message we're trying to kind of convey to all the listeners out there. So there's room for improvement for sure. I can't wait to see what future iterations of the Magic look like. But for now, it's just kind of tough sledding. He's going to be a very positive offensive player, but a flawed one in that he needs a lot of attempts to get his points, and it kind of drags down the ceiling of the Magic overall.
Total agreement. I mean, right now, if you look at cleaning glass, Orlando is 24th in the league as an offense, but they're third in the league on defense because of the personnel they have.
Yeah.
Almost all their personnel is excellent on defense. In terms of shot making from the perimeter, the one guy who I think they kind of held hopes for was Cole Anthony. But as a perimeter shooter right now, like over the course of his career, he hasn't really brought it in terms of percentages and in terms of volume. He's still kind of more of an inside-out player where they need more outside-in players, people whose game starts at the perimeter and then works its way in. They don't have enough of those right now, and that's kind of why their offense is tanking a little bit.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. But that's kind of the picture of the Magic. They made great strides this season. Paolo has as well, but there's still food on the table. Yep. So they'll address that in future seasons, and they're going to be forced to reckon with for a long time. They have a great young core all the way down the spectrum. They just need a little bit better guard play, a little bit better shot creation. But you look at a team that has definitely improved their shot creation abilities on that team. Or Houston Rockets have done a great job in that. They're a little bit farther along than the Magic. They made some free agency splashes last summer, bringing in Dylan Brooks, bringing in Van Vliet, bringing in Jeff Green. And all these players have been very productive, very solid. But to narrow our focus a little bit, we're talking about a sophomore that's on this Houston Rockets team. That's going to be Jabari Smith Jr. So for Jabari Smith, I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch him in Summer League, but that's where the improvement started. I watched him. I think it was that Trailblazers game. It was the Blazers and Rockets, the one that it was a game winner by Jabari Smith. It was very early in Summer League. I think he had 30 points that game. And from there, it was just, man, he was just proving that I don't belong here. I've made such an improvement in my game that I am far and away better than almost anybody that's going to be on the court with me here in Vegas. And that's carried over into this season. You look at the numbers, you're not going to see a huge increase in points per game. It's not like he went from 14 to 20, right? It's not like he's become an offensive focal point. That's still Van Vliet. That's still other guys on this roster apart from Jabari Smith. He's not going to dominate in terms of touches per game. If you look at his usage rate, Avi, it's actually lower this season than it was last season. Last season, it was 17%. This season, it's 16%. So that has happened because they've brought in extra offensive firepower like Dylan Brooks and Van Vliet. They command a lot of touches. They're very ball dominant players. So for Jabari Smith, it's caused him to have to pick his spots a little bit more carefully because the shots per game are down, the usage is down. But it's had a positive impact on his efficiency. So he's kind of in a more positive light than Paolo in terms of efficiency. And part of this is because the roster construction just makes more sense around him. But to his credit, he's improved his 2-point percentage from 48 to 54, big jump. 3-point percentage went from 30 to 37, huge jump on that front as well. Free throw percentage, 78 to 82, very solid improvement. He's in the 80s. That's where we want a guy to be. That's a 6'10", or maybe a small ball 5. True shooting percentage. So for those of you that might not be aware, true shooting percentage is basically a combination of 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, and free throw percentage. If you want to combine it all into one number, you get true shooting percentage. Jabari Smith is at 58%. Last season was 51%. So that 7% increase just kind of paints the picture of how he's so much more efficient this season. So that's the big story in terms of the numbers. And then if we want to get a little bit deeper in terms of the on-court product, I think a big difference in his game is the strength, just being able to hold his ground more effectively. He's not pushed around as easily. For his shots, he's not getting moved off his base. He's a solid, strong base. Going to the rim, he's more confident in being able to create space for himself, get off good shots. That really showed itself in Summer League. Like I saw that from the get-go. And he's taking more shots to the rim, less mid-rangers. I think that's another product of increased strength. You feel more comfortable going to the rim as opposed to settling and taking more mid-range jumpers. So those are a few little differences I've seen so far in this game. And I think all of those have combined to make him more efficient, a better player, although he's not dominating the ball. He's not getting a ton of shots per game for a Houston Rockets team that already has plenty of other guys that can assume the responsibilities.
Couldn't have said it better myself. When watching Jabari Smith, I think the point you made about Summer League is actually very instructive. If you compare his rookie Summer League versus his sophomore Summer League, it was night and day. As a shot creator, he just looked so much more comfortable. Physically, yeah, he looked much more like I belong here. I know what I can do. Physically, these younger kids can't keep up with me. I can get to my spots. And in fact, in Summer League, I had a very, very basic model that kind of evaluated prospects, and I was trying to determine who I thought would be some of the best players to come out of this Summer League, who I thought would be like NBA ready. And the 4 names that popped up in my model were Chet, Orlando Robinson, actually, surprisingly, Keontae George, and Jabari Smith. Those were the 4 that really popped above the rest of the crowd. And he's carried that over this year. Now, some of that is also context. Last year's Houston Rockets were maybe the ugliest watch ever. Like I'm including this year's Pistons. I'm including this year's Spurs, and I still think last year's Rockets might have been worse as a viewing experience than them. Defensively, it was all over the place, and offensively, you just felt really bad for Jabari Smith because I think the role that he currently has is the one he probably could have had his rookie year as well.
Sure.
Having Van Vliet makes all the difference in the world. Finally, he has someone who can actually feed him shots closer to the hoop, someone who can get him more touches in zones that he is better equipped to score in, such as more closer to the paint, near the rim. He can provide a little bit more of an alley-oop threat. Those aren't stuff that point guards of the past, let's say, with Houston allowed him to do. So I think that's part of what makes a big difference. But the strength, you do notice it. I think overall, right now, he profiles as like a solid power forward as a starter. I don't know what his long-term growth will be because I'm not sure how many on-ball reps he's proven that he deserves. I don't view him and think, oh, okay, I want to give him more of the ball. I feel really confident in his ball security. And as a shooter, he's all right, but compared to the next rookie we're going to talk about, Keegan Murray, I don't feel as confident in his outside game. But I just think the circumstances, the improved defensive scheme around him, which has let him kind of pick his spots more defensively, foul a little bit less, but also just be more of a presence on the boards. I think that overall he is a more effective player this year, but it wouldn't have shocked me if he was similar last year. It's just the context around him last year was so bad. It made him look terrible.
Yeah.
One last note on the true shooting percentage thing, just to give an indication of how much of a jump that is. Last year, when he was at 51%, that was 7% worse than league average. And now he's almost at 59%, which is 1% above league average. And typically, when you're looking for shot creators from your starters, you typically don't want your starters to be lagging too far behind the average. And
Right.
last year he was, and it wasn't totally his fault.
No, exactly. Exactly. I mean, context is everything. Situation means a lot. And especially for young players, I think that their situations influences their game a lot more than more established players. If you go and take Luka and you drop him into any team in the league, he's going to be Luka. Like it's not going to change. But a guy like Jabari Smith, guys that are still trying to find their footing in the NBA, just the system they're in, it's such an influence on them because they're not established enough to know they don't have enough experience to know, okay, this is where I need to take my shots. These are the kind of looks I should be trying to generate on a nightly basis. For Jabari, it was okay, I have a smooth mid-range game. I'm pretty slight of frame. I don't have a lot of strength. Let me try to get something going in the mid-range, which, as we know today in this analytically driven era, that's not a shot you want to lean on a ton unless you're in the top 1% of mid-range shooters, like maybe a DeMar DeRozan or someone of that mold.
Durant.
Exactly. For a guy like Durant, guys that can shoot over 50% from mid-range, which is a complete outlier. That's not the majority of people in the league. But yeah, like Jabari has just kind of realized where he needs to get his shots. And yes, like I agree, like last year's Rockets, he was being fed post touches and high post touches by Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. Those are two names you don't want to be relying on to be your floor general for 30, 35 minutes a game. They're just not that type of player. You bring in Van Vliet. Okay, we know that he's a very efficient three-point shooter. 39% this season on 7.8 attempts per game. High usage, like high frequency, high accuracy. Defenses have to respect that. On the other side, when he's needed to just get other players into position and give them good shots, 8.5 assists per game.
Yep.
So we're talking about definitely above average 3-point shooter. And we're talking about probably a top 7 to 8 assist man based off of assists per game this season. So playing with a player like that, man, I mean, it just does wonders for your game. So definitely want to give the Rockets system credit, the Rockets front office credit, Ime Udoka credit, because they've all really played a part in just making this team into what it is, which is a legitimate playoff contender. But on the flip side as well, we want to give Jabari Smith some props because we know that as a second-year player, we've seen second-year players struggle. They've actually gotten worse sometimes in the rookie year. And for a guy like Jabari, yes, I agree with you. I don't see a guy that's going to be a top offensive option for a championship caliber team that you just feed the ball and say like, okay, make something happen, make something out of nothing, be a hyper efficient, like high usage player. But I mean, as a guy that can be like a 17, 18, 19, maybe 20% usage player to be an efficient 3-point shooter off of 2 dribbles or less, be a pretty decent mid-range shooter, a guy that can get to the rim at a decent clip and finish with a good free throw percentage. I think that's where he slots in as being a very, very good player. Maybe an all-star-ish type of caliber when he gets to his full form. And, we can't forget the fact that he's also a solid defensive player as well. For all this talk about offense, that was one of the big highlights coming out of college was, hey, this guy can guard multiple positions with his length, with his quickness. And I read a piece by Zach Cram at The Ringer. I've plugged his piece before when he has his Cram session Wednesdays. Guys, got to check that out. He has a whole article about the biggest stories in the league right now. One of his stories, ironically enough, was about Jabari Smith Jr., who we're talking about today. And he mentioned that Ime Udoka said that Jabari Smith is started out on 4s when the game starts, but as needed, he switches onto 3s and 5s.
Yes.
So that paints the picture of his versatility as a defender. So I like how he's versatile. I wouldn't put him in the all defensive, defensive player of the year conversation, but I mean, above average, super versatile, a true weapon on that side of the floor that can, you can put him on some pretty legitimate offensive options and not have to send a double team or really just stress your defense. So great two-way guy that I think is going to have a long future in this league.
And that was part of the appeal with him as a prospect. I think if there were two areas where I think he can still grow, and I feel actually really good about it, it's becoming more of a pull-up three-point shooter and defensively gaining more confidence from the coaching staff and in himself to be able to guard 3 through 5. Whereas right now, more of the time, he still spends on power forwards. I think as he grows even stronger and he grows more confident, there is a possibility that the Rockets start using it even more frequently as a small ball 5 because he'll have the size, because he'll have the strength. And then as a pull-up three-point shooter, when you watched him as a prospect, that was actually one of the main drivers of his appeal, is that his three-point shot looked really good, and there were flashes where he's pulling up from deep and it looked really nice. His first year in the league was really rough. That's actually another reason why the Rockets coaching staff deserves a lot of credit, because this was a player who on pretty high volume for a power forward was shooting about 30 to 31% from 3. And it would be very easy for a player like that who's struggling to start losing confidence. So it helps that Jabari is a really confident player, at least so it seems. But it's also up to the coaching staff to make sure that they keep reminding him, hey, no. We don't believe in this 31% stat. We believe in your history. We think you're more of that 37, 38% type of shooter. And it's paid off in a big way. He's kept his volume up, and the three-pointers are flying, and they're looking good. Again, if he gains even more confidence from the coaching staff, and now he gets a little bit more opportunity to actually try some pull-ups, maybe you'll generate a little bit more usage that way. Maybe you'll get a little bit more shot creation that way. You'll get more of a green light from the coaching staff to attempt more drives. So I think those are the two main points. I mean, he's fouling people less than he did last year in terms of shooting fouls. Where last year there were times where even though he's not even the main shot blocker, there were times where there was, I don't want to say undisciplined fouls, but there was a little bit more frantic just fouling of players, which seems to have been tempered down a little bit. So all in all, I think it's a very, very positive jump from Jabari. And I think there's still a little bit more he can add.
Absolutely. There's still some there. There's still some there. We don't want to shoehorn his role or, say he can only do this. Yeah. But yeah, he's super exciting, man. And the Rockets overall, he's a big reason why they look so good this season. They've been so much improved because he has been so much improved as a player so far. While we're on the topic of Western Conference playoff contenders, let's shift our focus to Sacktown, man. This is another team that they're actually very close to the Rockets in the standings. If you're looking at seeds 6, 7, 8, 9, like they're all right there in that mix. And their sophomore, Keegan Murray, has been making waves as well. He came on the scene and he really changed the narrative in Sacramento. They finally hit on a draft pick, a top 5, top 10 draft pick. They had a hideous history with top picks. Nick Stauskas, Marvin Bagley. Sorry, Kings fans, to bring up this pain. Just a rough history. But Keegan has broke the mold. He came in instantly last season as a very solid 3-and-D player and helped the Kings get to their first playoff appearance in just so many years, since the mid-2000s. And he made some strides last season. This season, it's been even more of what he did last season. And in Summer League, kind of going back to the beginning of his growth for this season, his development was more on-ball reps, more of creating with the ball in his hands as opposed to just being a spot-up shooter, which he's great at. He can do that. But the Kings wanted to see how he would operate, how he would perform in a role being more on-ball. So if you go and look at what he's done so far this season, he has had some monster games. I'm just going to put that out there right off the bat. If we go back to December 16th against the Utah Jazz, 12 three-pointers. That's Klay Thompson-esque right there, Steph Curry level. 47 points career high. Just I want to say it was about 8 days ago, actually. They played the Pistons, and he had 32 points. This is a guy that is combustible. He can really just make defenses pay on the perimeter. If you give him too much space, he can get hot. That's one of his calling cards, is 3-point shooting at the 3/4 position. That's what he can do at a high level, right out the gate. So looking at his 3-point percentage this season, yes, it is a little bit worse. So, we're talking about a guy that's down. I think he was 40% last season. He's down to 37% this season. But I mean, that's not a bad mark. That's not a bad mark. We're talking about a guy that has more responsibilities. He still has to take
Also
on
small
some,
samples.
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Small samples. He takes on a lot of tough defensive assignments. So that's going to kind of take away from his offensive production a little bit. But on the bright side, the 2-point percentage is up a little bit to 55%. That's up 3 percentage points over last season. So there is that part of it. The usage is up. He's still not a high usage player. We're talking about 16% up from 13% last season. So we're talking about low to now he's, I want to say maybe like low to medium usage, like not even that high still, but more on ball reps, more of the ball in his hands. He is the perimeter stopper. So if the Kings need to slow down a Kawhi Leonard type of player, a Paul George, a LeBron James, Keegan Murray's the guy for the job. He's asked to guard these guys. He has a lot of the toughest defensive assignments in the league, and that's because Mike Brown has a lot of trust in him as a defender. As a 6'8 wing, 215, 220, he can make a lot of things happen on that side of the floor. And the Kings as a team are much better defensively when he's on the court. So on-off numbers paint a very good picture here. 5.2 less points per 100 possessions via cleaning the glass that the Kings allow when he's on the court as opposed to off the court. All that to say, very good two-way player, great shooter, knows where to be, can cut off the ball. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. He is a plug-and-play type of wing. You need a guy that you can just throw in there like an OG Anunoby and just say like, hey, be on ball, be off ball, D up the number one offensive option on the other team, and just make us better as a unit. That's Keegan's calling card. He's done so well with that part of his game so far in his career. And he's getting better at that, although there's been some growing pains. There's been some, rough outings, and he's just trying to get adjusted to a bigger role, and that will come in time. But for now, the Kings are a great team. He has great guys next to him. Sabonis on the inside, Fox on the outside. Malik Monk is also a sniper. So he has a lot of room to work with, and he's just going to get better at that, making things happen with the ball in his hands, kind of as things move on. But what is Keegan Murray, as you know, if you watch Kings games, you know that they always do that little chant after he makes a three. What is Keegan Murray shown you so far, Avi?
Watching him and Jabari back to back in a weird way felt like I was watching two sides of the same coin. Keegan is almost like the wing version of Jabari in some ways. You have like this low volume, efficient shot maker who defensively is providing you a lot of value. Now, the difference is, as we already went over with Keegan, some of the matchups the Kings are making Keegan have to take defensively are insane. And as a large wing, the fact that he can actually stay with most of the people that he's guarding and actually has the lateral quickness to be able to stay with them, even sometimes get over screens, that's really impressive at his size. And then when you look at it offensively, you see, okay, he can actually shoot off ball. Those 12 threes you're talking about, that's something that they can use with him a lot, and it's really helpful because the Kings offense is kind of like the Warriors offense in the sense that it is based off of a lot of off-ball movement, having Herter and Keegan fly around the court, Malik Monk too, Fox sometimes. You have all these guards and wings that are just able to keep rotating around the perimeter and finding openings, and to have such an efficient perimeter shot maker and outside in player, as I'm going to keep saying, in Keegan Murray, helps with their spacing and helps with their offense. And then in terms of his ball security, the fact that he doesn't lose the ball very frequently, he's not responsible for many turnovers. When you watch Keegan Murray, you can see why the Kings are high on him. And I think it's because when they watch him and they watch how Lauri Markkanen is doing with Utah, I think they see some of that resemblance and they think to themselves, if we just let him if we keep increasing his confidence and we keep pushing him and we keep increasing his role year by month, year by year, maybe there's a chance he grows in somewhat closer into the player that Lowry is, but perhaps even better defensively.
Yeah.
Offensively, I don't see him as comfortable in the paint and in the mid range as a scorer as Lowry is.
Agreed.
But you never know. You never know with Keegan Murray.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, I mean, that's a good comparison between him and Jabari Smith we just talked about. Both of them have like a 3-and-D type of role in terms of like they can make some things happen offensively. They're not going to dominate the ball offensively, but they can work off of good looks generated by other players. An observation on defense I've made with Keegan, and not specifically like on Keegan, I wouldn't put this on him, but I think it would help him in terms of that defensive load and responsibility that he has every night. If the Kings can supplement him a little bit better with some defenders,
yes,
we're talking about Fox, Malik Monk, and Sabonis. Like he has to cover a lot of holes there.
He shouldn't have to.
No. I mean, for a guy like that, I mean, I get that he's a strong defensive player and he's very versatile. Like that's all well and great. But I mean, man, if you have breakdowns in the perimeter, if you have breakdowns in the paint, I mean, we all know Sabonis is not a shot blocker. He's not a rim to turn by any stretch of the imagination. Then I think that kind of drags down his efficiency, his ceiling, because he has to cover up so much on the defensive side of the ball. And, you know, if we're looking at Sacramento's mark here on cleaning the glass as far as their defensive efficiency, I mean, it's not a pretty picture. You know, right now they're 20th in the league. So not terrible. They've been much worse in years past.
Much worse.
Yeah. And I honestly think they are 20th because of Keegan Murray. I pointed out that they allow about 5 points per 100 possessions less when he's on the court. If he was hurt for an extended period of time, they're easily, I would say, bottom 5 defense. Like, honestly. Yeah. I mean, last night they had a complete breakdown against the Suns. I mean, yeah, it was KD. KD did KD things, but I mean, like, those things happened. Yeah.
It was bad. They could get wherever they wanted last night. I mean, that breakdown, I think that's Mike Brown's going to have nightmares about that for at least a week. I mean, that was 100%. Really bad. And total agreement with what you're saying. Keegan Murray's load right now defensively is far too great. I think on an ideal team, he would probably be maybe my second or third best defender. But on this team, he's having to be the A1. And I think that's a bit of an issue still. I mean, he's really good. But I still don't feel comfortable having him on quick guards or on like players like LeBron, these massive power forwards who can still kind of beat him with strength. I don't feel great about that. But I like the fact that he's taking on the challenge and he's doing better than you might reasonably expect. I still just don't want him as the A1 defender.
No. His role needs to be scaled down a little bit. Not much, but just enough on defense to where it props up his offense a little bit more. And he's even more productive because I think there's something left on the table in terms of his offensive production. And I'm sure they will sort that out in future seasons. Not sure, you know, too much that they can do this season. I mean, Siakam is off the market. You know, that's a trade we're going to discuss on our next podcast. But yeah, there's just not much they can do about that this season. I think it kind of just it caps them. It caps them as a mid-tier playoff team. A first round out, maybe second if things break right again, like they did last season. But and despite all that, Keegan is having a great career so far. That was the perfect selection at number 4 for the Kings. It broke up this monotony of selecting guys that had this cachet, that had the names, and they just went for a guy that just fit. And he's just like a glove. He just makes sense.
Total agreement. And I think one last little point I just wanted to make here. When you look at Jabari Smith's three-point shooting, he's at like 38%. When you look at Keegan Murray, it's almost the same. So why then am I describing Keegan Murray's upside to be a bit closer maybe to Lauri Markkanen, and I didn't bring up that comparison once for Jabari Smith? It's because when you look at the sort of three-point volume that they have and you look at the sort of three-point attempts that they're getting off, the difference is Jabari Smith right now he's much more of a stationary shooter. Whereas when you watch Lauri Markkanen and when you watch Keegan Murray, there are many more glimpses, not just glimpses, it's a routine thing where you will see them running off a ball and running into their shots. And those are far more difficult shots. And they also add much more value because those aren't plays that you're necessarily setting up for them. They're coming within the flow of the offense. So
Right.
you generate much more offensive value because you're not taking any possessions away, and you're still having these odds that maybe they'll get open and they'll get a good look. Then you just find them and they can make these difficult shots. That's part of what drives the value for those two, and that's also kind of why I feel like if you're watching Keegan Murray and you're a Kings fan or you're in the front office, you keep looking at Larry Markkinen and just saying, okay, what's the playbook here? How did he go from this to this? How can we get Keegan Murray to do the same? Because I do think internally there seems to be some belief that he can be an all-star type of player. And then when you watch Larry Markkinen, you think, maybe that's not so far-fetched.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. There's definitely something. He has a great ceiling. We'll put it that way. He has a great ceiling. We'll just have to see if the Kings can kind of reorganize that roster a little bit to kind of fit him and help him realize that potential. So we're going to get to our fourth rookie here, Avi, that has had a, let's say, up and down career so far. And that's not entirely his fault. Jaden Ivey of the Detroit Pistons, number 5 overall pick in 2022. He had a great rookie campaign. He started sluggish. He gained steam as the year went along. And by the time we got to about this point in the calendar last season, he was looking a lot better, specifically in that kind of in-between game, the floater game, the mid-range game. He understood that he can get there almost anytime he wants. The three-point shooting improved, and he was taking better care of the ball. So overall, as a decision maker, Jaden Ivey improved a lot as the season went along. He wasn't just this loose cannon that was 100% all the time. Guards like that, it takes a while for them to understand how to harness their speed. John Wall learned it, I think, year 3 or so in his career in terms of the speed and agility, the athleticism. John Morant, about the same time, once they got to, years 2, 3, 4, they understand that, like, if I adjust my pace in terms of that start-stop action to get the defense off kilter a little bit, I can get to the paint, I can get to the mid-range, I can make things happen there, open up the floor for myself. So Jaden Ivey made great strides in that part of his game last year. This year has been rough. And like I said, it's not all his fault. Here's what he's had to deal with, obviously, so far this season, having Monty Williams as a coach. On November 10th, and I think this was kind of after an injury side. This might have had something to do with an injury here, but he had a DNP on November 10th. Did not play. 5 games played this season with less than 20 minutes total in the game. So he was in the teens in terms of playing time. 5 games. He went from 31 minutes per game last season to 26 this season. 5 minutes per game less this season. Okay, yeah, he's playing with Cade Moore. He's had to kind of adjust his game a little bit to compensate, but he's had to get used to playing with Cade Cunningham, who missed most of last season as well. These are just a few things that Jaden Ivey has had to deal with this season, and it's just really, I feel for him, because you're a player that made all rookie last season. You made these strides in your game. You were learning how to be more of a patient point guard, be more efficient. And it's like he got punished for it. Like, I understand Monty Williams is trying to instill a culture of defense, but I think that went too far, went too long. He didn't understand that, like, hey, this team, you're probably not going to be great on either end of the floor. But at least play your best players the minutes they should be getting. High 20s into the 30s. Jaden Ivey should be getting that. Okay, yeah, he's not the best defender. He has a defensive box plus minus in the negatives. But he has a better rim percentage this season, 10% better, 10% increase in rim percentage. The long mid-range is better, about 50%. The three-point percentage is struggling, went from 34 to 31 this season. But he just needs a consistent role. He needs to be able to know that, like, hey, you're the starter, or hey, you're the spark plug off the bench. You're getting 25, you're getting 30, not 31 game in 15 the next game. And we had a podcast a little while back about that point, about his role in the Pistons overall. But I think he still has promise as a guy that can be the 1 or the 2, play on or off the ball a little bit, use his quickness to generate good shots for his team, himself and his team. But there just needs to be more consistency. And I think that lack of consistency has really hurt his game, his confidence. And it's a big reason why he has taken a major jump this season. In a few areas, yeah, he's made some strides, but it's been tough sledding, and it's just the Pistons experience overall. It's just a lot of disappointment.
It is, and I think I almost understand how Monty Williams ended up making the choice he did. I can imagine him watching Jaden Ivey early on, because at the start of the season, when you're watching Jaden Ivey, it looked like now with Cade back, because again, Cade only played 10 games last year. So
Yep.
when Cade came back, it looked early on as if Ivey was struggling a little bit with decision making. He's dribbling too much. There were too many silly turnovers where he's just driving into a forest with no real plan. His handle is still a little loose. So much like many of the other Pistons guards, there's too many turnovers, too many fast breaks, and they go the other way. So I can imagine Monty Williams sitting, watching that on his own, on his computer or whatever he watches it on, and getting extremely frustrated. And then watching Killian Hayes on defense and thinking, oh, I love this guy. Oh my God, he does exactly what I ask him to do. He competes really hard at the perimeter. I mean, Ivy does too, but he's so much better at getting around screens. He's a defensive playmaker. I got it. Let me just put him in the lineups. Let me give him those starting minutes. That's a great idea in theory, until you realize that it's Killian Hayes, and you're also starting Jalen Duren, and you're also starting Isaiah Stewart. Where's the shooting again?
There's our
There's no
Tom.
shooting. You have no shooting. You have no offense. Your
Nope.
offense is kaput. There's nothing there. So I think it took a long time for Monty to realize, okay, Ivy can't really shoot either. And I know right now his pull-up game is still under construction, let's say, but he cuts to the hoop well, and he's very good as a slasher. And that's more than I can say right now about Killian Hayes. Long term, I think the goal with Jaden Ivey is still the same. You want him to feel more comfortable snaking pick and rolls. You want his shot making to improve. You want his footwork in the mid range to improve, because right now, again, he has no mid range game really, and he's shooting like 30% from three, which is not ideal. So you're just hoping that he can improve as a shot maker enough that then you'll actually be able to see him as a positive contributor offensively on the floor, on all three levels. And
Right.
defensively, I think once Monty started putting him back, he was already playing hard before on defense, but he was fouling a lot. Since he's come back, he's still fouling probably more than Monty would like, but you still see these flashes where, oh wow, he is a capable shot blocker at times as a guard, just because of how explosive he is, how competitive he is, and just pure timing. He can get vertical really fast.
Yep.
He's a good player. He's adjusted well. He hasn't complained. And when you watch him play, there's none of the dragging his head or running back slowly. He typically plays with proper intensity. And when you're on the Pistons, a team that I would say maybe only has 5 good players total, I think it's imperative that they keep playing him and they work with him behind the scenes to help him improve his jump shot, so that
Yes.
then he can become like a proper, true starting level player, and maybe a little bit more than that.
Yes. 100%. They have to give him more opportunities. Give him a runway. Let him learn. The season is lost. It's been lost for a long time, probably since game 15. It's been just another lost season. So you might as well give these guys some reps and let them learn through their mistakes. I want to back up that point you made about him being a pretty good shot blocker as a guard. Clean the Glass has him at 1.2 as a block percentage. That's 90th percentile if we're talking
Yeah.
about guards. So he's in the upper echelon of guards when we're talking about his ability to alter shots as a 6'4" guard. Very impressive. It does show that he gives some effort. He does use his athleticism to his advantage on that side of the floor. He's not just going to let each play pass him by. He's going to try to make something happen. So that's a positive mark on him. But yeah, I mean, it comes back to the shooting, like you said before. He's got to climb above 30%. He's at least got to get into that 34 to 35% range, have a little bit of respect from the defenses. And I want to kind of go back to what you said before about the outside end game. If you're allowing yourself more opportunities at the rim by forcing the defense to come out, get off balance, actually show respect to you, close out, I mean, man, he's going to be such a destructive force. And I don't think he has the kind of, let's just say, maybe margin of error that a guy like John Morant does.
Yeah.
Because he's a guy I thought of a lot when I was watching him play when he first got into the league with the Pistons. I saw some John Morant in him as far as the explosiveness and the first step and everything. So I don't think he is that prolific of an offensive player to be a subpar shooter to where it's like, okay, you're 31, 32%. You're still going to be a 20 plus per game scorer and all this other things. Like, I don't think he is the level of passer that John Morant is. I don't think he is quite as polished as a player and that getting to the rim, finishing at the rim as John Morant.
He doesn't have that floater.
No. He's going to need to polish that part of his game. So, I mean, fact of the matter is Jaden Ivey needs to kind of clean up those parts of his game. It's like the puzzle is there's pieces here and there. You can see like there's 10 pieces in the puzzle and there's like 5 pieces filled in. It's like, okay, this can work. We just have to fill in the blanks. And we have a very solid starting level guard, athleticism, maybe an ability to get his own shot beyond the paint, be able to get his teammates involved a little bit. So, I mean, next to a guy like Cade Cunningham, we're going to have to see how that goes. But as far as long-term future, I'm pretty high on him still because I just feel like this season has just been rough for him. He's had a lot to deal with. So if his role solidifies even after Cade comes back, I think we're going to see a similar uptick in his game, kind of like we saw last season after the halfway point to where things started to click for him.
Totally agree. And when I'm watching Ivy, it feels a little bit the same way as I did when I was watching Duran, as I went over earlier when we had our Pistons podcast, I think like 2.5 weeks ago. There are times when he wants to try creative passes, but the spacing is just so terrible that there's no point. There's just a sea of arms and nothing will be completed. So sometimes it almost feels like he might as well not bother. I feel like on a hopefully they improve the roster in the next few years so he can actually try some of those incisive passes to rim runners and there he can develop a little bit more of a connection between him and Duran. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, I think the only thing with this current roster and with the fact that a jump shot isn't built in a day, the main thing right now that I would look for him is cutting down the turnovers and specifically being aware of when you have stalled out on your drives or when there are too many people within the area and you're not going to be able to make your way through and just kicking it out for the extra pass. Don't try too much. Don't put an extra turnover on your stats. Don't cause your team to have to run back on a fast break when they don't need to. Just make the simple play sometimes and just get a little bit better in terms of recognition and feel for what you have to do in that moment.
Absolutely. Avi, there's a lot of players in this league that have that feel for the game that you mentioned before.
Transition.
One of the players that really comes to mind for me first when thinking about just a feel, just knows where to be on the court, is J-Dub, a.k.a. Jalen Williams for the OKC Thunder. Number 12 overall pick in the 22 draft. Draft steal, honestly. It took him a little bit of time, I think, in year 1 to kind of get his footing and become a starter. But I think it was game 20 or so where the Thunder were like, okay, this guy needs to be playing 30 minutes a game plus. He's just going to amplify everyone else's strengths on this team. And here's why. Kind of like Murray, versatile defender. But he's not overtaxed as a defender. He has Giddey next to him. He has Shea next to him. He has Chet next to him, who we've talked about at length. So for him, his defensive role, yes, he does pick up some tough defensive assignments, but he doesn't have to do everything on the perimeter. 6'6" wing with a 7'2" wingspan. He uses every inch of it. He just knows how to just disrupt these players. And, he has his strength down, a guy that can D up against some stronger players, stronger forwards, hold his own. And he also uses that on offense, I've noticed quite a bit. When we're talking about percentage of shooting fouls that are and ones, 25%. That's definitely above average. About 60th percentile when we're talking about that. When he's going to the rim, you'll see a lot of times during the game where full speed ahead, he just knows how to kind of get his body into a defender, still shield the ball, and have enough strength to finish through the contact, not be knocked off his path, get to the rim, finish for an and one. Just finish shots at the rim just in general. So for him, that has happened along the path of becoming more of an offensive player. He has the ball in his hands a little bit more, 2.5 shots per game, more than last season. And the 3-point percentage on the same attempts has been great. So last season, about three attempts per game last season, 35% on threes last season, 45% this season. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy that is knocked down. That makes no sense, man. Between him and Dort, both 40% shooters, and you wouldn't think players like that 40%. Like, you look at them and they're like, okay,
it's the Chip England effect.
Players. Yeah, like, it's just such a surprising trend to see. And that's one of the reasons why the Thunder are so lethal, because a guy like him that can finish at that level, you can't leave him on the outside either. So it's almost like a pick your poison. Those pick your poison players are the ones that truly become good to great to elite players. There's no way to guard them really. And again, he knows where he is at his best. For Jalen Williams, only 21% of his shots are threes. That's way below average. He takes a lot of mids, he takes a lot of rim attempts, and he's hyper efficient. So his effective field goal percentage is almost 60%. So that's when we're talking about twos and threes combined, effective field goal percentage, hyper efficient guy. We talked about Cason Wallace last week. This is Cason Wallace on steroids. That's the kind of way I think about it. Higher usage, but just about as efficient as Cason Wallace. Just more minutes, more touches, more shots. So that's kind of like the story of J-Dub for this team.
More difficult shots.
Absolutely. More difficult shots. He's going against some of the team's better defenders on the opposite side. So all these things he does so well for the Thunder. He's a connector. He's an amplifier. And he's a big reason why the Thunder are already knocking on the door of contention. Because between him and Chet, they're perfectly balanced. Chet, dominant at the rim as a defender. Shea gets deflections. He's top of the league in deflections, top of the league in steals. He makes things happen at the point of attack. Jalen Williams, hey, I can kind of bounce between the two. Perimeter, paint, whatever I need to do on defense, I can do it. And I'm going to knock down shots at a high level. So across the board, draft steal, a guy like that number 12, you can't ask for more. And J-Dub, honestly, has become one of my favorite players to watch in the league because he does almost everything so well on the basketball court.
Fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Watching Jalen Williams and then watching Brandon Pajemski both come from Santa Clara in back-to-back years. And
Santa
me
Clara,
watching
man.
them, I've watched a bunch of Santa Clara just because of those two. And because first of all, their advanced stats popped off even in college. So that made me a little curious. So I went to watch them. And both of them, excellent feel. I mean, these are guys who are capable of playing the two, capable of playing point. And in Jalen Williams' case, he basically plays as a wing. Sometimes I've seen him in lineups where he's playing the 5. Like, it's ridiculous what he can do. Yeah. But to watch both of them back to back and then watch my mindset where I'm watching them like, wow, their feel is incredible. How high is too high for them? And then backing out at the last minute because, against high level competition, I don't know what they'll look like. I've seen them a couple times. I don't know if they'll be able to get to the rim against the best guys. And just because of that one or two limitations, moving them down. In Brandon's case, just moving him off my list. And in Jalen's case, moving him down from 5 or 6 where I might have had him to 10 when I put my draft pick board. I mean, he is exceptional. Like, he does everything well. He's basically a third star. I almost gave him all-star consideration because there's not a single thing he does poorly right now. Mm-hmm. He's a slinky, smooth shot creator. When you watch him and then you watch Scoot, you feel the difference. He feels almost the same way Shea feels. Small opening, just squirts his way through. Oh, there's a drive, there's a layup. Yep. His game is excellent. He cuts well. He plays well off of Shea or whoever's the ball handler. He's an excellent driver. He goes into contact well. He generates contact, and he's an excellent free throw shooter. He has great footwork. He has a solid mid-range game. He passes the ball well, whether he's on ball or he's just the extra passer, and he reads the court excellently. Again, his 45% three-point shooting, I don't know how sustainable that is. I mean, Chip England is Chip England, but like 45% is still a little too much. But I mean, even then, I could see him finishing with like a 61% true shooting percentage, which considering his volume and considering his usage is actually really, really good for someone of his caliber. Defensively, OKC's roster is just filled with excellent defenders. So on that team, I wouldn't even say he's top 3 as a defender, maybe not even top 4, but that's more because of their roster.
Yeah,
Defensively, extremely aware, and he's pretty good at creating deflections, and he has excellent timing.
he
He's
does.
not foul prone either, which is a good indicator when you're a young player. It shows your feel defensively. It shows your ability to um, follow instructions, keep your ground, and not get pushed around too much. He can still be beaten with size and power or with a little bit with quickness, but only against elite guards. Otherwise, he's excellent. I'd put him even a level above Keegan Murray in terms of being able to cover guards.
Yeah, same here.
And his quick hands, man. I mean, in terms of deflections, he's averaging 4.4 deflections per 48 minutes, which I believe is third right now in the league behind Dyson Daniels and Tari Eason. I mean, that's excellent company to keep because those guys are like havoc. They create havoc everywhere. I mean,
Oh
they
yeah.
are havoc themselves. They are the chaos agents.
Yep.
So for you to be third on that list, it's excellent. I almost consider him a third star. And I think that there's a really strong case to be made that in the 2022 NBA draft, the OKC Thunder selected the 2 best players.
Mm. You know, I don't think I think there's a great case for that. When you think of both of these players being all-star caliber in year 1 and year 2,
Yeah.
like who else has done that recently? You know, like back-to-back years. That's really just I mean, really the same draft, but one guy missed a year, but that's just incredible. I mean, that's just the OKC experience. Like they just almost every guy they drafted is just they just work out. They just play the perfect role for that team. It's just a wonder how they keep doing that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what else to say about him other than that he's just a phenomenal player. He's probably one of the most balanced players in the league. You're just
Oh
talking
my God.
about what he
Phenomenal.
brings to the table in every category. Like just so impressive. So impressive that he's understood and picked up the game so quickly. And I also want to go back to the point about situation or circumstance. The organization of the Thunder and having a guy like Shea lead the charge, I
Yes.
think has accelerated the growth of all these players. That's why Chet has been so great in his rookie year. That's why J Dub was so good in his rookie year and even better right now. That's why all these guys fit in so well together. Is great coaching, great culture, a great shooting coach, like across the board, just great personalities. So got to give credit to that as well. And it's a big reason why, I mean, the Thunder are ahead of schedule because their players are ahead of schedule. They're
Yes.
just figuring out how to do all this. So he does so much damage, man. He's just the epitome of efficiency.
They're so mature as a group. I mean, when I watch J Dub, I could easily imagine maybe players on other teams saying, "Hey, I'm this good already. Why is my usage not higher? Why aren't I getting more chances to create on ball offense? Why can't I score more? Why do I have to defer so much to everybody else or play within the flow?" But because that entire team is all about us, it's not about me. It's the way they defend. It's the way they screen, top to bottom. The best players, the worst players on the roster, top to bottom. Everybody screens, everybody defends as hard as they can. There's no inkling of, oh, okay, now it's my time. I just got to be Mr. ISO man and, move my teammates to the side. They will go into ISOs, but those are set up ISOs. There's never let me just completely defer what the coach is saying and just go off on my own and just do something wild or crazy. Everyone plays the way they're supposed to, and he's the epitome of that. I mean, again, back to that drive stats. If you go to NBA.com, Paulo was first in drives per game. Jalen Williams is second. The difference, Paulo shot 40.8% on drives. Jalen Williams shoots 54.3%. We're talking like almost a
Big difference.
14% difference.
Big
And you
difference.
can see it when you watch
Yeah.
them. Jalen
Mm-hmm.
Williams, partially because of all the pressure and all the energy, defensive energy that Shea attracts, he plays off of that well. He'll stampede to the hoop as soon as he catches the ball. Honestly, it almost feels like it's even before he catches the ball. He's already making his way to the hoop. And then you see the explosiveness. You see him be able to do these Euro finishes. Watching him yesterday against Paul George, you see some of that. You almost feel like you're watching a younger version of Paul George, and they're almost competing against each other. Yesterday's game was phenomenal, by the way. Paul George clutched up, but
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of upside we're talking about with J Dub, and that's why it's so easy to be so excited about the Thunder, because you could make a case that your 3 stars, your 3-star model, it's right here. And very few teams in the league can say that we have this young, homegrown 3-star lineup that's already this good now, has a long runway, and has so many picks if we want to trade them.
Yeah, so many options, man. They're just perfectly set up for the present and the future.
Yep.
Really hard to do. One more team, man. One more player here. We're gonna end off the pod on this point here. The Sheriff, aka Walker Kessler, number 22 pick in the 22 draft. So another somewhat of a steal here. This pick was traded, I believe, from the Timberwolves to the Jazz.
Yep.
That was in that Gobert trade. So Kessler comes over here and he immediately filled a role similar to Gobert. Low usage, pretty irrelevant offensively, but gets on the boards and blocks shots and just an ultimate rim deterrent, rim protector. So, I mean, he was a great, basically like a mirror image of Gobert in a lot of ways. So that was his performance last season. He was awesome. He came on the scene, really made a difference. This season, I feel like it's kind of been a mixed bag a little bit. Looking at some of the numbers, the 2-point percentage is down a little bit. It's still very good. So 72% to 68, still a really high mark. Rebounds are down a little bit. He's in the 7 range now. He was at about 8.4 last season. And I know he doesn't shoot a lot of free throws. He's got to be better than 48%, man. I'm just saying, like, 48%, like, that gets you yanked out of the rotation in the last 5 minutes of a game in clutch time. You can't be a part of the rotation. And, that's going to keep you in the 20s. You're not going to be able to get to the 30-point mark when you're shooting 48%. At least Gobert's in the 60s. He hovers around 60, in the low 60s usually, maybe mid 60s each season. So it's like, okay, you're such a great defensive presence. We can probably make it work. For Kessler, it's just not there yet. But, going back to some of the positives, like, man, he just helps this team out so much at the rim as a defender when he's in the game. The Jazz, going back to clean the glass here, 9.4 points per 100 possessions less allowed when he's in the game as opposed to off. So one of those off numbers, like, just so much better defensively. So, I mean, he competes. He has great timing as far as jumping and contesting. He knows how to contest without fouling. And that's where his appeal comes from. So probably not going to be anything more than like a Gobert type of player on offense. The jump shot probably isn't going to be a part of his game. Probably not going to be a floor spacer. But he already understands what he does well, and he leans into it. Just got to be better about finishing when he is fouled, getting to the line, converting more free throws. Just ironing out that part of his game and just becoming a serviceable offensive player is really going to help him so much in terms of his future. But the Jazz overall, Walker Kessler, have been great this season, a great watch, really turned things around the past 15 games. I mean, he's a big part of that. Their whole forward rotation is a big part of that. They're so deep there. So they don't rely on Walker Kessler as much as maybe they otherwise would, bringing in John Collins and having Markkanen play so many minutes and having those guys in the fold. But despite all that, he's still carved out a pretty legitimate role for himself, especially as a number 22 pick. Some guys in the 20s fizzle out pretty quick. So the fact that he is a legitimate starter for a team that could make the playoffs, surprisingly enough, I did not think that at all going into the season, that they'd be right in the thick playoff race. But he's made his mark, man. He knows how to really just be a old school big man that can protect the rim. There aren't a lot of guys like him left in the league. Just an old school throwback, like, hey, rebound, roll, block everything. Like, there's still a certain appeal to that. And it raises the floor of the Jazz so much, just being such a great defender.
I wouldn't call Utah an island of misfits. Maybe you'd call them like the Salt Lake of misfits. But I mean, that's what it feels like watching them. I mean, John Collins' second home was on the trade block. Colin Sexton was just kind of cast aside. Larry Markkanen, before last season, nobody expected him to become the sort of star he was, other than maybe the Finnish national team. I guess maybe those guys expected it. Walker Kessler, he was in the deal, but I remember when the deal was first reported, people almost talked about him almost as a throw-in. Jordan Clarkson is still on this roster somehow. Most of this roster was just cobbled together. Chris Dunn just came out of nowhere again from the G League and started playing great minutes. He's a starter now. I mean, it's a testament to Will Hardy and them almost treating it. They're almost treating each player equivalently. You don't feel like there's a star just because of how much of their rotation is playing more than 20 minutes per game. You have like maybe 10 guys every night who'll play more than 20 minutes per game, and nobody really who's playing more than 32 to 33. So you're just kind of rotating people in and out. And in that sense, it works best for Walker Kessler because offensively, he's just so limited. I don't know if there's any long-term upside. I know his 2-point percentage right now is a little bit down, but again, I attribute some of that to playing with Keontae George now instead of playing with Mike Conley like he did for part of last year. Like I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't really trust him as a passer. The jump shot is it's the same catapult jump shot as ever. It's looking kind of broken. It always has. He is what he is, but as a shot blocker, I think he's even better this year than he was last year. He has great chemistry with Keontae, which is really helpful for Keontae as a rookie. He's an excellent screen setter. He plays drop really well. Sometimes he can slide his feet at the perimeter, but he's just so good as a shot blocker that it's like, why even bother? Just leave him in the paint.
Up to the paint.
Yeah, just leave him there. I mean, there's no point. Opponents shoot almost 18% worse than expected when he is guarding their shots within 6 feet of the hoop. And on a very large permanent volume as a shot blocker, I mean, that's best in the league. That's actually best in the league for qualified shot blockers. That's better than Gobert. That's better than Jaren Jackson Jr. That's better than even Wemby and Chet even. I mean, that's how elite he is. He has a 10% block rate, which is best in the league. And second place is actually Wemby. He's the only one above 9%. And third place is Chet at 7.7% among the qualified bigs.
The trifecta.
Very effective. He's excellent at the cat and mouse game in the pick and roll when he's playing drop, and he uses his massive frame phenomenally. And he's disciplined enough to always stay vertical, and half of that that's half the battle in terms of helping a young big become a shot blocker. And then on top of that, he's just really good in terms of timing where he puts his hands so he actually does block those shots. He has some rim to turns quality, but it's not the same as Gobert, where Gobert could just be even on the perimeter, sense danger, and just run right in and block shots or deter shots. He's not quite that level, but again, he's not Gobert. But he's still really good. There's a reason he's coming off the bench, but he's still excellent.
For sure.
Because of how limited he is offensively, I see why he's coming off the bench. And the starters have actually thrived a lot with the 5-out spacing of having John Collins at the 5. And it's helped Colin Sexton the most. I mean, he's done a great job of just knowing his role, knowing what he's supposed to add to the team, coming in and always providing excellent minutes and always helping the Jazz be in a better position than when he entered the game. They've outscored opponents by 3.2 points per 100 possessions when he's on the court, and his on-off is 7.3 per 100 possessions. So I just think he's a great player. I just wanted to talk about him because of that.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. And I'm glad that we ended with him, on a good note with the Jazz overall and their play and Walker Kessler. And it just goes to show that, I mean, everybody on this list that we talked about, they have some level of promise. Some are, hey, Jalen Williams, certified star already, almost an all-star. Other guys like Walker Kessler, like maybe he never gets there, but even if he doesn't, still a very serviceable player, still a great asset to have. And I think he's one of those players that, like, you might not reach the mountaintop with him as a primary guy in your rotation, but you can only be so bad. I think that's one of the reasons why they were down here. They were down and out of the play-in tournament, and they surged. And last season, before they fell out late, they were in the mix because with a guy like that, it's so impactful on the defensive side of the ball. The streamer just loves the thumbs up, man. We start talking about these players and hyping them up, they just give all the thumbs up. But
you know it too.
Yeah, I mean,
he knows what he is, and he's good.
Exactly. This thumbs up all around for Walker Kessler and the Jazz, and the floor is so high with him. Is kind of what I'm trying to say in terms of his game. So, Avi, this has been a great discussion. I hope this summit has been fun for you, and I hope it's been enjoyable for the fans out there. We love just getting to let you guys know about the young crop of players in this league. So, this is probably going to be it for our kind of our highlighting all the young players. I promise we'll get back to some talk about the vets here very shortly. But in any case, we thank you guys for tuning in to yet another episode. If you guys want to look at all of our content, it's going to be on notradeclause.com. All of the draft picks, except for one second rounder that's undetermined at this time, has been updated on our site. So be sure to check that out if you want to see how everything looks in the aftermath of the trade. And we will talk about that trade on the next podcast. No Trade Clause, one word, on Instagram. No Trade Clause, no Trade _ clause on Twitter. And of course, No Trade Clause on YouTube. Subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, so you can see a lot more content like this. So Avi and I are signing out, guys. We hope to see you on the next installment of NTC. Until then, have a great rest of your day and enjoy some NBA basketball. See you.